Go global so your customers can pay the way they want. Whether it's cards, e-wallets, or cash methods, WeChat Pay, Spay, or M-Pay.
يمثل السيد محمد عبد الله حسن لحظة فاصلة في التاريخ الصومالي. يعني عندما وقعت هذه اللحظة تغير كل شيء.
هو من طرح أن الشعب الصومالي له الحق في أن تكون له دولة ذات سيادة ويحكم البيت من أهل البيت.
Mohammed Abdullah Hassan, he was, as the British records have said, he was the most implacable enemy of the British Empire for 20 years.
Like many anti-colonial figures throughout history, Sayyid Mohammed Abdullah Hassan polarized opinion. Many Somalis today think of him as a fierce resistance leader, a devout Muslim, poet, and champion of the nationalist cause. But the British colonial authorities who governed much of the Horn of Africa in the early 20th century referred to him dismissively as the Mad Mullah. He led an army of Somali dervishes, ascetic Sufi Muslims, in a relentless 20-year struggle against the colonial British, Italians, and Ethiopians. His great-granddaughter, Tufaha, is now following in Mohammed Abdullah Hassan's footsteps to discover the truth about his remarkable life.
Tufaaxay waxaad magaga timiday galbeed iyo dhulka gaaladu tagto fikirro fara badan iyo waxay yiraahdaan magacyo fara badan oo qalaad oo anu gaaran ma Maxamed maar mulla miyo aha fikir noocaas baa seedo aragtaa bal ka waran arrinta
hadda maar mulla markaan macnayno waa wadaadka waalnaa
sax
marka ma ninka dhulkiisa difaacanaya waalnaa mise kuwa u yimid ee raba inay dhulkiisa qaataan oo gumaysiga ku maamulaan keebaa waala markii adugu danku weydiin
For the past century, scholars have been piecing together the events of Hassan's life, and they continue today. The Somali historian Ojama Said Isa gathered oral and written testimony from Hassan's surviving dervish followers and collected many of the patriotic poems that formed part of his legacy. When Hassan died in 1920, the colonial British, who'd spent 2 decades fighting him, attempted to erase that legacy.
waxa ay uu ninkaasi u taray Soomaalina wax ma garanaysaa in la qiimeyn karo ma wax weyn aan isleenahay anagu wad ka tarteen aan isleenahay in la ururiyo horta gabayadiisii iyo wixii uu ku cabiray ama uu ololaha ugu sameeyay ama uu dadweynaha ku yaani dhiiri gelinay ama uu وحسوس يدير قليل يدقال قليل انتبه إنان وحكا قيب قلنا أنه أو جامعة أو عيسى وهرموت كاها نين حوله سي أردن قليه إنو دعميو أرورنتا إيو كيدكا قبيدي محمد عبد الله حسن
أو جامعة عمر عيسى يعتبر الجزء الناقل للتاريخ الصومالي خاصة تاريخ الدراويش لأنه التقى بشهداء العيان التقى بالرجال اللي كانوا دراويش، التقى بالأسر اللي كانت يعني حوصرت في تلح، التقى الشعراء، التقى الدراويش أنفسهم، التقى بالخواص. فكان ديوانه ديوان جامع لنا لفكرة الدرويش في الديوان، ونشف عام 1971.
Most sources say that Said Hassan was born in 1856 in the valley of Samadikh, near to what's now the Somali-Ethiopian border. But some suggest he was born in Kirit in northern Somalia. Wherever his birthplace, he grew up in a region called British Somaliland, a colonial protectorate which existed from 1884 until 1960.
oo quraanka markii koowaad buu bilaabay caruurnimadiisii quraankii markuu dhamaystayna geedihii jaamacadan loo ahaa geedaha ahaa ee la tagi jiray kutubta laga aqrin jiray naxwaha iyo sarfiga iyo maartay kitaabkii fiqiga ahaa iyo tafsiirka quraanka iyo ahadiista.
Said Hassan was a member of the Salihia Sufi Islamic order. Islam was and still is the dominant religion in the region. Hassan used his religious influence to rally Somalis against the colonial occupation, framing the struggle as a holy war to protect Islam and Somali sovereignty. The British colonial authorities responded by introducing Christian missionaries, which Hassan viewed as a threat to Islam.
في هذه اللحظة كان لابد من بروز رجل يشبه السيد محمد عبد الله حسن. يعني هي اللحظة تشبه صلاح الدين أو عمر المختار إن صح التعبير.
Before the mullah, what we have is this imperial context where the Somalis who live in their land, they have been divided between the French, the British, the Italians, but also the Ethiopians as well in the Ogaden. And so that is the situation in which the mullah finds himself in.
The Somalis get squeezed in between. I mean, like until the mid-19th century, I think there was Somalis were living in the Horn of Africa without any centralized rule. They were a society without any centralized political authority. You had local, you had sheikhs, and you had traditional leaders, but there was no king for Somalis.
Said Hassan's religious and political awakening probably began in 1884. This was when he went to the holy city of Mecca to perform the Hajj pilgrimage. While he was there, he was influenced by the Saliha order, a newly developing movement led by a Sudanese mystic called Sayyid Muhammad Salih. He also met the Sudanese religious and political leader, Muhammad al-Mahdi, who fought against British rule in Sudan. Hassan's pilgrimage to Mecca was a transformative experience that heightened his awareness of the broader struggles against all forms of colonialism. He then returned to Somalia via Aden in Yemen with a clear mission: to resist British, Italian, and Ethiopian colonialism in all their forms.
cadan baa laga raacayba halkan mad mullah ingiriisku ugu bixiyeen markaas Soomaali baa buraaqada ka shaqayn jiray meel batroolka oo cadana oo buraaqada markaas Soomaalida baa isla yaabto waa ninkan wadaadka ee la xiray aan iska soo sii dayno gaalka aan la hadalo turjumaanna ahay deeni baa yiri أنا سوسي ديريا he's a mad mullah.
Hassan therefore returned to Somalia, spiritually transformed, determined to spread the teachings of the Salihia order. There was already a Sufi order in Somalia called the Qadiriyya, but Hassan didn't believe their principles were strict enough. Hassan adopted the traditional Salihiyya form of dress, a white sash and loincloth. The Dervish movement was an armed resistance group that operated in Somalia in the early 1900s. Muhammad Abdullah Hassan was its leader. Their goal was to free Somalia from British and Italian colonialism. They also fought Ethiopian forces to the west and called for full Somali independence. The movement wanted to create a country based on Islamic principles.
He went back to the area where he was born, to his mother's land, so to Dulbahante area around Buhotle, and that's where he established his own followers. I think between 1897 and 1899, for 2 years, he managed to establish a large following in the area. Then I think he wrote a letter to the British in Berbera saying, either you withdraw or we are going to have a fight. And I think this is then, this is where the anti-colonial uprising started.
Oh dear, my small business owning friend. You never grow good business with bad website.
I know, but it's really hard.
Do not do the despairing. Try Ionos. Let clever thinking AI build you a smart-looking professional website that is optimized for mobile in no time. And use its many tools to get your business growing super quick.
Nice.
No, my darlings, this is nice. Try Ionos, your digital partner at ionos.co.uk.
Britain's military resources were spread over a wide area in the early years of the 20th century. They were involved in conflicts in Southern Africa, Nigeria, Ireland, Afghanistan, Somalia, and then most significantly in mainland Europe and the Middle East in the First World War. In British Somaliland, Muhammad Abdullah Hassan celebrated his battles with the British colonial forces in song. The Dervish War began in 1899 and lasted for 21 years. On one side was Hassan and his 20,000 Dervish fighters. On the other were British soldiers with support from the Ethiopian Empire and the Kingdom of Italy. The revolts may have been triggered by some Christian missionaries who adopted a group of Somali children and converted them to Christianity. Hassan was outraged. He wrote that, quote, "The British have destroyed our religion and made our children their children." The opposing forces clashed in early June 1901 near the southern city of Las Anod, then a stronghold for a British military expedition. On the 3rd of June, the battle reached its peak. The dervishes were not as well armed as the British forces, but accounts suggest they fought fiercely. In the end, the British were forced to withdraw and concede defeat.
The mullah is Muhammad Abdullah Hassan. He is noted as a significant religious figure by the colonial authorities, by the British, by the Italians, as soon as he comes back from Mecca in the 1890s. And when he decides to launch his jihad, and he launches it against not just the British, but against the Ethiopians, who are Christian, and against the Italians, who are also Christian, and against the British, this is noticed by all these authorities. When it becomes significant is really in 1901, where he manages to defeat a British military expedition.
الحملة الأولى سأسميها حملة الصدمة للبريطانيين. صدموا في الحملة الأولى من قوة الدراويش، قدراتهم العسكرية، قدرتهم على استخدام الجغرافيا لصالحهم في المعارك، شبكات الإمداد التي كانت لديهم في الحصول على السلاح، في التجارة، في التواصل مع الدول. نظام الاستخبارات الذي كان يمتلكه الدراويش فوجئ البريطانيين بهذه القدرات العسكرية. هم عرفوا في هذه اللحظة أنهم لم يعطوا الدراويش حقهم الحقيقي، وعلموا أن هذا الخصم خصم عنيد.
The British forces set about avenging their defeat at La Sanad. A month later, the two sides clashed again. This time, British troops attacked a dervish stronghold. However, the dervishes were ready and carried out a well-planned ambush. The battle quickly escalated into brutal hand-to-hand combat, and for the second time in a month, the British were forced to retreat. The spoils of battle included a cache of British rifles, which were seized by Hassan and the dervish fighters. British and American newspapers reported on the man they called the Mad Mullah, by then a thorn in the side of the British colonial authorities. Newspaper articles rarely used Hassan's real name. Instead, they regaled their readers with the latest exploits of the so-called Mad Mullah.
على طول بدأوا في الحملة الثانية، لكن برضو واجهوا فشل في تحقيق الأهداف للاستعجال في البحث عن حل جديد أو حل لهذه الحملة. الحملة الأولى كانت حملة الصدمة، الحملة الثانية كانت محاولة لاستعادة الكرامة واستعادة ماء الوجه، ولكن الحملة هذه واجهت نفس الإشكالية. هنا البريطانيين تعلموا الدرس.
كانت أخباره تنقل دوليا، يعني صحيفة نيويورك تايمز في أرشيفها حوالي معظم 50 قطعة أو خبر عن السيد، من ضمنها القصاصات هذه. طبعا الإنجليز كانوا يطلقوا عليه الماد مولة، نستطيع نقول يعني الملا العاقل، يهدد بربرة. هذه في شهر 5 مايو 1901. في القصاصة هذه الماد مولة أجين لاست ستاند، يعني المعركة الأخيرة معاه، هذه في عام 1901. يعني كان الإنجليز متوقعين أنه سيهزمون السيد في شكل سريع جدا. إذا نظرنا إلى هذه، الماد مولة تم هزيمته 18 يونيو 1901. طبعا الخبر طريقة كتابتهم خاصة فيهم، لكن الفكرة من هذه أنه السيد كان رجل يتم متابعة أخباره بشكل عالمي للجمهور العالمي، وهذا يجعل منه يعني له صفة عالمية وليس أيضا صفة فقط محلية.
If I was to start my running journey all over again, then these are the 7 essentials that I would recommend to make things a lot easier. And number 7, it's the most important. A good pair of shoes, something comfortable. You don't need any carbon plates to start off with, just something for every day. Some comfortable clothing, something lightweight and chafe-free. Fuel, something like gels, something that's going to keep you going during those long runs. Headphones, a good pair of headphones and a good playlist will always take you far. A good running belt, something
By now, the British had realized that Hassan was a formidable opponent who united Somalis and employed effective guerrilla war tactics. They continued to fight him for 2 years between 1901 and 1903, but struggled to gain an advantage because of the difficult local terrain, the logistical challenges it posed, and the dervishes' superior intelligence network. The British tried to form alliances with local clans and with Italian and Ethiopian forces, but the dervishes consistently outmaneuvered them as they prepared for battle.
In conversations of resistance and revolution, Somalia is one nation whose struggle against colonialism often goes unmentioned. What most people don't know about Somalia's anti-colonial struggle is just how incredibly resilient the Somali people were. Not only was the country colonized for 120 years from 1840 until 1960, but it was colonized by not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 imperial powers. Britain, France, Italy, and Ethiopia. Hailing from the Horn of Africa myself, the warrior spirit of my people lived on through folk songs and stories we enjoyed so much as children. The Somali people's unrelenting fight for the preservation of their faith and freedom was not only one of chivalry and pride, but as we shall see in this episode, a tapestry of human creativity and poetic expression. In the chaos of Europe's scramble for Africa, Somalia's story cannot be told without the mention of the iconic religious leader and national hero, Sayyid Muhammad Abdullah Hassan, also known to the British as the Mad Mullah. But guys, before moving on with this episode, I feel like I've been a little bit unfair. In telling our story, we're often accused of being biased and not giving credit to where credit is due. Let's give the British the credit that they deserve. The Mad Mullah is a sick name, guys. 10 points for creativity. Whoever came up with that name, it's brilliant. Like, if it were me, I wouldn't even be mad. But let's get back to the story. Born in 1856, Sayyid Muhammad hailed from a distinguished line of Islamic scholars. As was the tradition of his forefathers, Sayyid Muhammad spent much of his childhood wandering in search of religious knowledge with his family. As was the tradition of his forefathers, the Sayyid's upbringing was a nomadic one. He was born and bred in a world of highly disciplined and fortified men, where they lived in the raw elements of nature as the masters of their world and cultivated a fierce sense of pride for their way of life. At the age of 8 years old, the Sayyid was placed under the tutelage of a local scholar who taught him Quran and the rudimentary principles of the Islamic faith. By the age of 11, you guessed it, the Sayyid not only memorized the whole of the Quran by heart, but had also developed a noticeably sharp wit and clever way with words. His father kept a close watch at the boy's talent, nurturing this God-given gift. Once reaching maturity, as a young man of discernment and skill, the Sayyid would then spend the next decade or so continuing his travels to centers of knowledge across East Africa, including Mogadishu and Harad. Sitting at the feet of great scholars, his thirst for knowledge took him to new spiritual heights. It was during his pilgrimage to Mecca that he would formally be initiated into the Salihiyya Sufi order, a moment of spiritual transformation that would mark the beginning of the Sayyid's monumental journey on the path of resistance. Upon his return to Africa, Sayyid Muhammad spent years traveling, teaching, and preaching across northeast Somalia, which had come under the occupation of the British Empire. Local traditions narrate one legendary story that is said to have been the turning point in the Sayyid's decision to launch his anti-colonial struggle against European occupation. While walking amongst his fellow clansmen, the Sayyid passed by a French Catholic mission in the city. Not only were the colonialists occupying Somalia to exploit it of its natural and human resources, but it's no secret that up until the early 20th century, the Europeans were hell-bent on converting Somalis to Christianity. Of course, in the most sinister of ways, the Catholic mission would search for and take in orphan children, baptize them, and give them new Christian names. On this day, the Sayyid came across a group of these young orphans near the Catholic mission and, in typical Somali greeting, inquired of their names and their families. Now, Somalis are a deeply tribal and religious people who take great pride in their ancestral lineage. So you could imagine the shock and horror on the face of the Sayyid when these young boys responded by saying that they belonged to the clan of the Church Fathers. This encounter is said to have enraged the Sayyid unlike ever before, confirming his suspicions that the Christian colonizers in Somalia sought not only the occupation of his homeland, but more alarmingly, the elimination of Islam from the hearts of his people. This story of the Sayyid and the orphan boys is said to have triggered what is known as the Dervish movement, a nearly 30-year-long struggle first against the Ethiopian imperialists deep in the Ogaden region of western Somalia, then later on against the British and the Italians. Of course, in the eyes of the British, the Sayyid was an outlaw, madman, fanatical rebel looking to stir up trouble in the northern regions. Annoyed by their very presence, the Sayyid and his warriors eventually turned their attention to the British administration in northern Somalia and, believe it or not, to the Qadiri Sufi clans who he accused of cowardice due to their lack of resistance against the British. Just to give you an idea of the ferocity of their resistance, in 1901, a joint Anglo-Ethiopian military campaign of 17,000 men failed miserably to cause any significant casualties to the Dervish army. At best, they were only able to keep the Dervishes at bay. The Sayyid and his men were such a force to be reckoned with that even the British Vice Consul reported that in the face of the Somali Dervishes, he had never seen his men so afraid for their lives. Being the renowned orator and poet that he was, Sayyid Muhammad composed invigorating lines of poetry to inspire his people to unite against their oppressors. For the Sayyid, their struggle was a deeply religious one that held the fate of the Somali people in its hands. In an address that he made to his people, particularly those he accused of treason, the Sayyid emphatically declared, "Unbelievers have invaded your country to corrupt you and to corrupt your religion, to force you to believe in their religion, supported by their governments, their arms, and their numbers. But your faith in God and your dignity is sufficient arms. Do not then flee from their troops, nor from their greatness of their arms. God is greater than they." The Sayyid's powerful prose, however, were not only composed to ignite revolution in his people. On several occasions, the Sayyid is known to have sent letters and poems to his British adversaries to deplete their morale and mock them for their failures. In a famed letter entitled "To the English People," the Sayyid said, "I have no forts, no houses. I have no cultivated fields, no silver or gold for you to take. You gain no benefit by killing my men, and my country is no good for you. All you get from me is war. I have met your men in battle, and I have killed them. Our men who have fallen in battle have won paradise. We fight by God's order. If you wish for peace, go away from my country back to your own." The Sayyid and his warriors continued to fight until 1920, when only through a combined colonial effort that the Europeans would eventually bomb the last dervish stronghold in the town of Taleh. Although the colonizers were successful in killing and scattering the dervish army, the Sayyid managed to escape. But his attempts to regroup his men came to no avail, as the Sayyid was taken ill and eventually passed away shortly after. Not only was the Sayyid's profound belief in the virtue of his cause evident in his poetry, but his mastery of the Somali language proved that he also understood the eminence of the spoken word in resistance. His artistic expression played a crucial role in not only uniting the hearts of his people and mobilizing them to fight, but also proved that the front lines of resistance against oppression are many. At the heart of colonialism is the need to erase indigenous cultures and religions, to strip a people of their voices and agency, and to wipe away their collective historical memory. This, again, guys, is not a thing of the past. Europe's colonial enterprise of our day constructs and imposes narratives to justify the subjugation and dehumanization of the colonized. Guys, resistance is as much, if not more, a battle of hearts and minds as it is a battle for lands and peoples. We cannot afford to underestimate the power of the spoken word, as it is something that each and every one of us is capable of. Artistic expression, such as storytelling, poetry, film and photography, and all forms of content creation not only amplify the voices of the oppressed, but convey the pain, resilience, and aspirations of our people who are otherwise being silenced. The multi-billion-dollar colonial propaganda industry of our time may have all the funding and resources to conceal their crimes against humanity, but their anxiety and fear of losing the PR war has never been more obvious. So guys, keep narrating the stories inspired by the strength of our people. Keep singing the anthems of resistance in the face of tyranny. Do not underestimate the power of symbolism in resonating and igniting our collective spirits. Because at the end of the day, this is ultimately a fight to keep the fire of faith alive in our hearts and in the hearts of our children for generations to come. Those on the side of truth are never anxious, nor do they despair, because as eloquently said by the Sayyid himself, God is stronger than they.
Sail, Southeast Asia, you can do it. The Inca Trail.
Can people play it? Yeah, it's like a musician from Jamaica play that music, you know? And like a musician from, you might find a black musician from America play the funk or blues, you know? And people only play reggae music.
Can it be copied quite successfully outside of Jamaica?
Well, you see, where I feel about the music, it can be copied, you know? But it's not copied to it. It's the feel. You know, it carry a feel where if you ask plenty musicians, them know it, but them can't do it. So people still searching for this truth here, which this reggae music, you know, bring across to them. And the only purpose it serves is to tell the people about Rastafari.
Did you always intend being just a reggae musician, or had you played rock music and soul music before.
In a sense, I really listen to a lot of music, you know. I mean, the first time, just to listen to music that play on the radio. Not that we couldn't afford to buy records, so we listen to the radio. And anything the radio play is that we hear. So I wasn't really into them things. I was really into, like, I call it spiritual music, you know, till it get more revolutionized, you know.
How long have you been a Rasta?
Well, I've been a Rasta from ever since, you know, but it's not how long I've been a Rasta, it's how long it takes you to grow up. Because what he is what he is. From the beginning to the end, you can never change, because if you even adapt things later out, you won't filter right out. So we're just Rasta from creation, you know. It's not an easy thing to explain in an educated standard way. Still you have people who can do it. But me is a common sense man. That means when me explain things, me explain it in a very simple way. That means if I explain it to a baby, the baby will understand too, you know. So we say now, like the Bible says, God same shall return as the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the conqueror Lion of a tribe of Judah. And him shall come in a new name. And this new name shall be dreadful among the heathen.
How important are the dreadlocks?
This?
Is that
This
part
is my
of being
identity,
a Rasta?
man. Yeah, this is my identity.
Do you have to have dreadlocks if you're a Rasta?
But if he's a Rasta, then you wouldn't see why you shouldn't have it, because then you don't know freedom is freedom and you don't have to bow, you do whatever you like. But it's not a thing to say, well, I would like to be a Rasta, but I wouldn't like to have this. You dig?
Mm.
It can't be a thing like that. It have to be a fullness where you yourself know that it's God creator and I don't want no life, no obligation. That means you own man. That's the first time you own yourself. You do what you want to do. Anything people want to say about you, you don't care, because, you know what I mean? Even them who say it still have a comeback, you see them have to do the same thing. The more you accept herbs, the more you accept Rastafari. You dig what I say? We who accept herb herb is important, but herb is more important to the people who don't accept it yet, because that is a reality. I mean, it's not so well then, so well then it's something that you crave, but you check it in your sense and say, herb is a plant. I mean, herbs are good for everything. Why these people who want to do so much good for everyone, who call themselves governments and this and that, why them say you must not use the herb? You see? And we check that and we can't find, we just see them just say, no, you mustn't use it because it make you rebel. Against what? Against men who won't crave, because them crave for the things like several, them have some material things and them want to captivate your mind and tell you, say, well, you have to work and put you on pension and him keep it all. So herb make you look for yourself, and instead of you want to work for the man, you want to be one of the man too. Not in the sense of how him is, but in the sense of why should you have to bow to these things?
Do you have to smoke to be a Rasta?
No, man. But in this time, I mean, like, for instance, you're reaching a sense where you're strong enough, can take a little smoke. So when all them car pass, although you live in the city, you don't hear it because you're thinking. Differently if you just live so. Then, you know what I mean, the whole world confused you and you're worried and you don't have no time to think. And herb is a thing that give you a little time for yourself so you can live, if you use it.
What about alcohol?
Alcohol make you drunk, man. It don't make you meditate. It just make you drunk. When you drink alcohol, you don't meditate. You're more get-headed. Herb is more a consciousness.
New to Seven Seas.